Okay, I click continue.
And there you go.
There we are.
Wonderful. So to start off with, would you like to say your name and where you are?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I say it in Norwegian or in English, but in Norwegian it's Reidulv. In
Hmm.
English it would be something like Reidulv.
Okay. Okay.
Rudolph will be more familiar with you, I guess, but Reidulv.
Okay. Reidulv. Okay.
Yeah, it's an old name.
I had never seen it before.
No,
I
no.
know. Okay.
It means
So,
flock of wolves.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
A whole flock of them.
yes.
Okay.
They are
So,
protected in Norway, the wolves, I mean.
wonderful. Okay. So, where are you exactly right now?
I'm in my apartment in Bergen, Norway. Uh, and yes, that's where I am. I am alone, so I can tell you that my wife, during 46 years, died last January. So I'm sitting
Mm.
here all on my own. Yeah.
Oh, I'm
So
very
I
sorry.
guess yeah, it's, yes, I'm in the grieving process, I guess. Yes, I don't
Mm-hmm.
guess, I know I am.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes,
yeah, that's a big loss.
it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first question for you is who are you as a person? And that
Hmm.
can be any aspect of yourself you'd like to talk about, your values, your passions, qualities, whatever you'd like.
Okay. Who am I? Who am I? What a question. Uh, an interesting question. Uh, and it's a, it's also a question of how short I'll keep it or how much I go on and on. Uh, I'm 73 years old. Um, and since my wife died, I guess I have been more reflecting on my history, I guess, and the history the two of us, shared together. She was a psychologist, as I am, and we met when we studied psychology here in Bergen. She was 2.5 years older than me, and she was ahead of me in the studies, I mean. So, in many ways, I looked up to her. Uh, yes. I would say that, of course, every life is a journey, but I think uh, I consider I have loved my journey in life. It has been amazing and something that I would never foresee, I guess. And the same has been true for my wife. Um, I, she grew up in a very Christian family with strict rules as to what was considered uh, uh, what you could do or not do. and and she was, I, I realize I speak about her now, but I guess that she has been so important for me, and I think we have grew grown very much together. We also worked together for about 10 years, doing Gestalt workshops and leadership development programs. So, yes, an amazing journey, but I think I'm very open to experience. I think I'm a quite sensitive and emotional person in many ways. I consider myself quite tolerant, uh, which is, in a way, a value for me to be
Mm-hmm.
tolerant and to be sensitive to other people. And of course, it's also my profession. Uh, that being said, uh, I may not be the easiest person I mean, being emotional also means that I can have a temper. Yes. And my father had.
For me,
Pardon?
being tolerant means you may not actually like certain things, but
Yes, exactly. Because when you speak about values, I guess I consider values to also have it to be somewhat a polarity. So being tolerant, you can be too tolerant, and you can be not enough tolerant, I guess. But traveling north, before or later you will turn south. So yeah, it's like that. So I think when it comes to values, it's also important to balance different values against each other, to have that balance. I would say that I'm very much influenced of the values from the French Revolution. I mean, liberty, equality, and brotherhood. And I consider myself very Norwegian. They say,
okay.
not in a nationalistic sense, but when I said that my life has been a journey, it has been. Norway used to be very, very, very poor. We had some natural resources, but we were a poor country with much agriculture, although the climate isn't as good as Mexico for that. But we had a huge fishery, and we had waterfalls that gave us electricity, etc. Anyway, before the war and after the war, I guess for more than 50 years, we have had Labour Party in government. That has somewhat changed during the years, but I would say that it is a saying that every Norwegian is a social democrat. So it is, Americans would consider us socialistic, but that's not true at all. We think in many ways in socialistic terms, but we have never been a communist state. We have borders to Russia, and these days we are a bit preoccupied with our security. And we feel that Russians are hacking into our government systems, etc., etc. But having had that history about being a social democratic society means that the Labour Party during many, 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 many years has secured that we also are a welfare state, which means that there is a security net for everyone. And the Social Democratic Party has been very preoccupied with redistributing wealth.
So
So
that's what you mean by very Norwegian.
yes, that we have a society, the glue in the society. Many of us, not all, but many of us are preoccupied with that glue that binds us together, which means that we don't have too many private schools, because the philosophy is that we stay together, which makes the glue in society, and it's free education. You don't have to pay to go to the university. In fact, you get some funding, and and there is very little privatization in the health sector. So it's free for everyone to go into a hospital and have operations or whatever. It doesn't cost anything. It's paid for by the state, which means that there has been a progressive tax system where those who earn most also pay the most. So I feel very privileged, because my wife, for instance, she grew up in poor circumstances up in the mountains on a farm where you had really to work to make a living, and you were never certain whether you would have food on the table, or you could, etc., etc. But then it was secured that everyone could have a loan to study at the university, and you didn't have to pay any interest. So to secure that there were equal rights, no matter what circumstances your parents had. And I think
Speaking
that's...
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you were going to say earlier, you just mentioned parents, and I remembered you just said that you were a father.
Yes, I'm a father. Yes.
How is that for you?
Oh, tears comes to my eyes. It has been great. It has been great, but it has also been challenging. My wife and I were both working hard when our children were young. And we used to have conflicts, the two of us, between the two of us, as to who did most, and etc., because, you know, time was limited and there were much to do. And at that time, it wasn't easy to get your children into kindergarten. So we had to have different ways of securing that our children were safe with others. So, yeah. A father, yes, that's important for me. And I have, I think, very good relations. I have a daughter and I have a son, and I have 3 grandchildren. And I must say that it has been no challenge at all to have grandchildren.
I've heard they're easier.
It has been fantastic. It has been fantastic. And in Norway, grandfather is pronounced in Norwegian bestefar, which means the best father. And I have found that it has been very easy for me to be fully accepting of my grandchildren all the time, and never a bad word. Because I didn't have the responsibility for their upbringing like with my 2 own children. So it has been a gift with grandchildren, and now they are 21, 19, and 4 years old. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. So this is a bit about your context and a little bit about who you are.
Yes.
So I'm also wondering what comes to mind as a particular event or a set of circumstances that you would say really influenced you.
Really influenced me, yes. One event that comes to mind is that I really pulled myself together when I was 19 years old, in the sense that I didn't care much about school. I didn't work hard at all, and my father was sometimes furious with me because I liked to be with friends and have fun more than putting in work to have good results in the school. But when I was 19 or 20, I guess, because I was in the military service, which is compulsory for 1 year. But when I studied at the university, I had to pull myself together, because to enter, to study psychology professionally, you have to have very, very, very good grades. And at that time, you had to study psychology for 1 year, and that, depending on your grade, you could enter into the professional psychology program. And I worked hard to have those grades. So that was a turning point. And I also think that my grandmother meant a lot to me. In a way, I have told you that I was and am emotional and sensitive. So each time I was mad with my parents, I used to go to my grandmother, and she would give me all the understanding I wanted, and she would give me everything. So I think that And I never was cross with her or mad at her. I loved her. Yes. So she was, in many ways, influencing me, I guess. I think my father and mother had a very traditional marriage, where my mother was a housewife many years till we were more grown up, and my father, he was the patriarch of the family. So there was a traditional female and male role in my family of origin. So I guess it was a turning point when I got married myself to have a more equal relationship, and I think it was a good help that both my wife and I were psychologists. So there was less of a power difference between the two of us than what was true for my own parents. But that
I'm wondering, how you did come to understand yourself within your gender or as a man.
How I came to understand myself. Yes.
Or how you experience yourself. I mean, not traditional, yes. Not like your parents, but...
No. I don't. When I was in high school, I had somewhat a traditional view on male and female, and were flirting a lot, and I don't know, more typical male, I think. But when I grew older, when I studied psychology, I mean, this was in the late 60s, beginning of the 70s. So we had, the student revolution, and we had the liberation of females. So there was a huge awareness building up as to gender and equal payment for your work, and the welfare system also, well, not at the time, but later, we have a very good maternity leave in Norway. So when you have a child, you get, I don't know how these days, but maybe 1.5 year full payment, and you stay home with your child. But there is also, due to the female movement, or I don't know what to call it, liberation.
Movement, I think.
Yes. Then it has also been decided that some months of that paternity has to be taken also by the father to ensure that both father and mother take care of the children and get the bonding necessary. So I think that my awareness of gender has a lot to do with the awareness in our society as to having more equal rights for both women and men. And we were a country where at one time the Norwegian government consisted of more women than of men, due to our prime minister at the time. So I think my understanding of gender has been building up due to awareness in society, and of course from many things I have read. And also thinking about my mother. She had simply too much responsibility and was, I don't like that expression, but I lack other words. She was more underdog, which was an unjust position, because I think she did more work than my father, actually. Yeah. So this doesn't mean that my wife and I did never have conflicts as to gender, because we did. But and I was her boss for some time, for 10 years. So because I had my own small organization, and she took part in that as almost an employee, although she was just as bright as me. And she had to negotiate with me about her salary.
Interesting. So I'm wondering with some of what you're saying, how you understand or experience privilege and power in yourself.
I certainly feel very privileged. There is no question about it. I'm very privileged. Um, uh, and uh, I know I have well, power. That's an interesting one. I have been working a lot with managers and leaders. Uh, and of course, some of them deny that they have power, which leads to difficulties often, because I think it's very wise to understand the power you have and why you have that power and not misuse it. So I consider myself quite powerful because I'm extrovert. I am to some extent emotional, which means that I can have a temper. I know I can be angry. And my wife sometimes accused me when we had parties, for instance, or doing programs together, that I too often was a bit domineering. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, which I think was quite right. But then I can also be humble and and um, look into myself and admit that yes, that was I understand your point of view and I try to improve.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's important because you're talking about being aware of
Being aware,
having and
exactly.
how you use your power.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So another piece of yourself that I'm curious about is your age and
My
how
age.
you are experiencing age or this part of your life.
Yeah. I have been reflecting on that question before you asked it because strangely enough, I often said to my wife that I will die before you. So I have, because, I calculated my
Yeah,
mother died at that
statistically,
age,
right?
and statistically, looking at the two families, and okay, your mother died when she was 90, my mother died when she was 70, etc., etc. So I found it likely that I would die before her. And in fact, 2.5 years ago, I had a grave cancer, so I had to be in the hospital for many months to have huge operations, and my wife was at that time living. Yeah, it was quite scary, but it was a terrible experience in many ways, but good in some ways because the nurses and the doctors were fantastic. So I really give them credit for saving my life. But I realized that I'm vulnerable and that at my age, certain things may happen that may decrease your health, or and even more so, my wife was diagnosed with cancer 2 months before she died, so it was a very speedy process.
Ooh.
In a way, there was nothing they could do.
Mm-hmm.
So when I consider age, I am in some ways glad for every day that I live because I enjoy life. I think I have more to do in certain ways. But I feel vulnerable, and I also, after having gone through hospitalization and cancer operations, I'm not in the same health condition as before. it has influenced me with some problems and stuff. So I don't take anything for granted in a way. And when I was sick, my wife and I discussed a great deal vulnerability and the prospect of dying, and discussed how each of us would cope if the other died. So we have talked a lot about that. So I feel that I'm very happy to be 73, and I hope I have years ahead of me, but I don't take it for granted as I used to. So I am more dealing with the question of death and grieving my wife, and have come more to terms with, how shall I say, I don't fear death that much. I fear the pain in connection with it, because I have really experienced pain on my own body when I was in the hospital. That I fear, but I don't fear death. And I'm not a religious person. My wife was not a religious person either. Yeah. I don't know. I forgot your question.
No, it was, I mean, it was age, but it's about age and where you are in life, yes, which is also sort of where we are relative to death.
I think there is the feeling of vulnerability now in my age, but there is also some relief. I mean, I used to work very, very, very much, too much, I guess. I don't do that anymore. And my wife stopped doing it at least 5 years before she died. She only tried to enjoy life as much as she could, being together with grandchildren, and she also took interest in knitting and wrote a book about knitting. And we had a house in Provence, in France, and we went there to stay every summer and spring, and had a very good time. So I feel that growing older is also a relief. It takes away some of the burdens, and these days and when my wife lived, we used also to say, how did we cope? How could we do all that? It was much work. Now I'm free to do.
Your wife's name?
Rigmor.
Okay.
Rigmor.
Sorry, I just,
yeah, Rigmor. Yeah. And the funny thing is that when we speak about values, she grew up, as I told you, in a very Christian home. My home or my upbringing was not so much with that, but religion also sticks. So when I discussed, before my wife died, only a couple of weeks before, I asked her, how would you like your funeral? What would you want? You can choose whether to have a humanistic funeral, or if you want to have a traditional Christian funeral in the church. So she said, I want to have a funeral in the church, and I want these and these and these psalms, and I want a singer to sing that song. And after the funeral, there is also very often you invite people to eat and speak about the deceased, etc. So everything was planned, and she told me exactly how that should be organized. So even though she did not believe in God when she died, she wanted that Christian funeral. Which,
it's interesting. I was wondering if what's behind you in the painting is an X or a cross. When I first saw you, I was trying to figure that out.
That's a cross, but it's can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah. It was a picture that I bought in Prague, in Czechoslovakia,
Mm. Okay.
So in a way, and I know that I would have Christian burial as well
Hmm.
in church. My wife, she also sang in a choir, a huge choir in the Doom here in Bergen, singing, at Christmas, giving concerts by Bach, and she
Mm-hmm.
simply loved it, and she was used to that in her upbringing, the singing, and Christian songs. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I think many of us need, or yeah, I guess need is the word, some of that ritual and some of that
Yes, the
sense of,
ritual. Yes,
yeah,
yes. And I
the
mean,
aesthetics.
so much great music, so much great literature, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
etc., connected to religion. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't just, even though
Yeah.
you don't believe in God or the afterlife,
Mm-hmm.
but the ceremony and the beautiful art that
Mm-hmm.
has been created, you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to lose that.
That's true. So I would like to switch a little bit and ask
Yes,
you about the other part, not just the human part, but the Gestalt part. So
yes.
I am wondering how you started or met Gestalt.
Hmm.
Another
I get
relationship in your life.
it touches me. It touches me
Mm.
to reflect on that because when I studied psychology, it was very, very academic, I think, and in the clinical part, it was uh, psychoanalysis, and we also learned behavioral therapy and a little bit of client-centered therapy, but never Gestalt. Uh, we were taught a lot about Gestalt psychology and Kurt Lewin, but heard very little about Fritz Perls. So I think I had been practicing for maybe 10 years before I got into Gestalt therapy. There was an American couple giving workshops in Norway at the time. And at that time, I stopped, I was the child psychologist. But then I got an employment at the Norwegian Business School doing leadership development. And some of them, or my colleagues, had been in Gestalt workshops. So they advised me to do the same. And I went in many workshops with someone called George and Judith Brown. I don't know if you've heard of them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I
George
found it,
Brown, the education,
yes,
yeah, the
yes,
pedagogue. Mm-hmm.
and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing. It was like coming home, and I felt that, wow, both on a personal and a professional level. So I guess I went maybe 7 or 8 weeks on different workshops together with them. And then one participant I met there told me about Irvin Miriam in San Diego. So I went to their program, their 8-week program in San Diego. And so turning points in my life, I would say that Irv Polster has, I have been, this was in, when did I go? 86 perhaps. And I have been in, and my wife, after I had been there on their program, she went, and I was there with her. And I even went all the way to San Diego to have supervision by Irv. And my wife and I also went there for 10 years after having been to their program, because they gave a week-long workshop for earlier participants in the program. And so I did a lot, and I also wanted to see how various Gestalt therapists did their work. So I went to England when Joseph Sinker gave workshops there, and my wife as well. And we went to Cape Cod, and we went to what the other place, Cleveland, etc.,
The
etc.
whole tour. So,
yes, yes. And each time it was fantastic, I think. And then my wife and I started also to give workshops for psychologists and psychiatrists here in Bergen, and also somewhat abroad. So
and
I
what
think
did you find in Gestalt?
what I found myself. No. Well, there was a grain of salt in a grain of truth. Is that in that? I worked when I finished studying psychology. I worked mostly with children, and I found that psychoanalysis didn't help me much, and I really didn't like behavioral therapy as it was practiced at the time. So I didn't know. So Gestalt therapy allowed me to be more of myself and my authentic self, and it gave me the techniques, it gave me the theory, it gave me so much understanding, and I enjoyed it so much. I began to write books, and my wife and I also wrote a book together about Gestalt counseling. The freedom to be creative and to look for the creativity in the clients and align yourself with those resources. I did very much groups and was amazed at how much creativity there is in a group once people feel confident in each other and in you as a Gestalt therapist. So yeah, and I also find that it influenced also the connection between my wife and I, and also with our children. So I think it had a larger impact than just professionally.
I was going to ask, actually, as you were talking, what did your children feel about the two of you flying around the world and doing these things? Because I know my kids kind of look at me like, oh God.
They were very, my wife and I think we talked a lot about psychology at home. And most of our friends were psychologists, couple psychologists. And so they were, surrounded by us. And in fact, my daughter, she is a psychologist herself, and my son works in psychiatric hospitals. It has some, but anyway, we took our children with us to the United States, so they also got to know Irvin Miriam, a poster, and visited them in their home. And Irvin Miriam came here. So I think our children had no trouble with it, although.
Well, I wasn't assuming it was trouble.
No, no, okay. Although my daughter said to me one time, to get to talk to you, Dad, I need an audience. If you speak to a royalty, you need an audience. So she felt that I was very preoccupied writing and planning workshops, etc., and left maybe too little space for her. But yeah, so it took up a lot of our time and our preoccupation, I guess, more for me than my wife, I think. I think. She was
But
closer
it
with the,
sounds like you
with it.
have a lot of excitement about it.
I do, I still have, I still have,
So
I still have.
I'm wondering what you would say came to characterize your work, what you did, what you consider your work in Gestalt.
Yeah,
Your work or your shared work with your wife, because I hear it very much as a
yeah,
team.
yes. Um, I did Gestalt workshops, as I said, together with my wife. Uh, I sometimes think about Irv Poster and Miriam Poster. Uh, I preferred Irv to Miriam, but with my wife it was the other way. She preferred Miriam, and I had a very good relationship. I consider myself no comparison at all, but I consider myself more like Irv and my wife more like Miriam, because I think Irv was more dominating and could go on and on talking, while Miriam was more, quiet and came in when she felt for it, I guess. So, and because I have done a lot of work, both in Norway and around the world, in leadership development and training leaders and managers, I may have had a more confrontational style in that work setting, because it was people, I worked with people with very high power positions. And to have credibility, you had to have some power in you to, I guess. So I could be hard and I could be soft, both. uh, and yes, I consider myself quite good, to be frank. It's hard to say.
Humbly.
But I don't recall many times that I have received negative feedback. So I've been very, very lucky. We have, as a psychologist in Norway, people can complain about you to your organization.
Right.
And your authorization can be taken away from you if you are not respecting boundaries. So that has never happened to me.
Your record is clean.
My record is clean, and my wife's record was also clean.
I want to ask, I think I'm very naive, but I'm very confused by the term leadership development, because I hear that people use that term in the corporate world, like you were just saying, with people who already have power and influence and money. And then it's like, I'm so confused, because you go in and you develop them more. And I always thought leadership development involved developing the people who were not in those positions.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's just a term that I keep hearing, and I keep running into organizational people. So I'm asking
one of the, as I look upon it, as many do, one of the important aspects of being a leader is developing your people and your colleagues. Very important part of what it means to be a leader, I think. And that means you cannot do that without being humble and without being able to listen to your employees, without being able to have more democratic processes and a policy for your employees that is good. So, for instance, I used Gestalt techniques. I gave lectures and all that about leadership, etc. But people if it was many participants, say 30, they were divided in groups of 6, and we would have a consultant for each small group and work with them on personal issues. We would have them make their own self-biography, for instance, and go into that so that they could see the connections between who they were and what they had become, and see if there were unfinished business, etc., etc. And also group dynamics was quite important, because leaders can't do the work on their own. And if you have a leadership team or management team, they have to function and work together, which means they have to understand each other and deal with conflicts and issues like that. And it's a whole lot of skills that is very similar to, doing ordinary Gestalt group work. So, like, I don't know if you heard about Carl Rogers. He did a lot of teamwork and leadership development programs, as did Kurt Lewin, the T groups, for instance. So I think I ran a program, 8-week long program for Norwegian leaders, for instance. So they stayed together all the time, and they were divided into small groups, and we never said it was therapy, but to a large extent it was.
The secret is out now.
Yes.
So this
and
is
they
a
loved
bit of
it.
what
They
you
loved
did.
it. They loved it. They loved
Of
it.
course. They probably needed it.
And they needed it. And I've done this internationally as well. And it is one of the things that amazed me is the cultural differences between various nations. But once you get under people's skin, you see that's very much the same issues that, quite
so
common.
You've said that your record was clean, in that no one complained. But I'm wondering what difficulties or challenges you ran into with what you did.
Yeah. One of the I mentioned for you that my daughter said to me, "I need an audience to have your time, Dad," which means that I prepared a lot for each workshop, especially giving lectures, but also because it was very often, extended programs. 2 weeks together, and then some break, and then another 2 weeks, etc. So I did a lot of reflection on how can I do this, how can I deal with this issue, how can I do that, etc. So it was tough often. It was a huge challenge. And sometimes I would be frightened when I did the workshop. Oh my God, is this person on the brink of suicide? Worries like that. And finding the balance between how to intervene. I mean, if I saw that this person has an issue with how he uses or misuses power, how do I deal with it? How do I try not to be too confronting, but, taking care of the person at the same time as having to deal with it? I felt an obligation to do that, because it wasn't simply a question of that person, but also what that person did to others, which could be challenging. But for the most part, I would say, really, people found it eye-opening to open themselves up to each other, and to find that, my God, I thought it was only me feeling this and that, but now I understand that it is common among us. So this mask of control and power, when that was taken away, the goal was at least to have them be more authentic and real and taking care of themselves at the same time as being managers. Because if they didn't take care of themselves, they couldn't take really good care of the people.
Right. So I'm also wondering, what are some of the memories that have stayed with you? Moments either in your own trainings or sessions you gave. What are some of those experiences that stay with you?
Uh, I remember one of the first workshops with George and Judith Brown. We were divided into small groups, and at that time, and it shifted whether it was Judith or George working with us. And this time it was George, and I was quite new to this, and I was sitting like this with my hands. I was talking about, what was it? Yes, I was restless. I was like this. And George pointed out, what is happening with your feet? What is happening with your arms? And I was looking at myself because I wasn't aware of it. And I looked at myself, oh, I'm restless, I said. So what can you do with that? Well, I can stand up and do a little bit like this. And I did, and then I sat down, and of course the same restlessness began again. Stay with it, he said, and I recall something came to my mind. Wow, I know why I'm restless. It's because I have been given a 2-week workshop staying away from home, and now I'm here for 1 week with you. That means 3 weeks away from Hilda, my daughter. And that makes me restless because I know she needs me. I should be there with her. This is wrong. And I must laugh. This is very long ago. And I was sitting there, and suddenly I began moving my hands like this. And again, George asked me, what are you doing with your hands? And it seemed crazy to me to sit like this. And I said, it seems like I'm pushing away some fog, as if I don't see clearly. And now I see. I tell you that my daughter needs me, but I realize that I need her, maybe as much or even more than she needs me. And he asked me, what can you do about it? I don't know. I think I have to leave tonight. Is there anything else you can do? Well, I can go to my room and call home, which I did. And I called home, and my wife took the phone, and I explained to her and asked to talk with my daughter. And she came on the phone. Oh, hi, Dad. Hi, Dad. Nice to hear from you. I don't have time to talk now. I have some friends waiting for me outside. That sticks with me, although it must be more than 30 years since it happened. And there has been many experiences similar to that when I have been in workshops. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to share anything else? Another one, or? I mean, I love storytelling, honestly.
Okay. Okay. There must certainly be many episodes from the program with Irv and Miriam. Yes. Well, I don't remember it quite, but I think Miriam heard me from time to time sighing, as if, oh, this is so much work, this is so much work. And she said, Reidulv, easy, easy, don't make it so hard. Which, yeah, yes, because I think I can make things too hard and plan too much and be too scared. So I have to be prepared all the time for eventualities.
That's exhausting.
That's exhausting, yes. I recall that, yes. And I will also recall when I was in supervision with Irv, it was only he and me in the room, of course. And I was looking down a lot. Can you look me in the eye and say the same thing? So I realized that I was deflecting and that I looked so much up to him that it was difficult for me to be on equal terms and sit and look in his eyes in a way. I gave him so much authority. And I guess at that time we were also beginning to be more like friends. So that was yeah, an important moment for me to realize that I am here with my needs, but maybe you also need something, Irv. So that made us more equal. And I think I was made to understand that even though it was me receiving supervision, there was something in it for him as well, being together with me.
I imagine you can understand that, having been on the other side.
Yes,
as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. So the last thing that I usually ask is, what's next? And that's what's next for you, and what do you think is or could be next for Gestalt?
Yes, yes. To answer the first part of the question first, I know very well what's next for me, because for 2 years now, I guess, I have been writing on a novel using Gestalt. I have written textbooks before, but now I try to write a novel, which is difficulty. It's a totally other genre. So that I'm doing, but I'm writing about a psychologist doing psychotherapy. Individual psychotherapy and group therapy. And
it's not an autobiography at all, right? No projection.
No projection, no nothing. No, it's a completely stranger to me, this main person, this main character. It's funny that you say that, because the other day I was reminded suddenly that the way to deal with dreams in Gestalt is to, take ownership of each character in the dream. And I have a few characters in this novel I'm writing, and then it's all part of me. So
I had the simplest realization the other day that the word project is actually the word project, just pronounced differently. I always thought I had projects, and I was like, oh, you idiot.
I've never thought of it that way. No, but that's true. Yes.
I was like, that was so simple. I can't believe anyways. So you're writing a novel which has nothing to do with you?
No, nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. No, no, no. And nothing to do with my wife, and no, not with my children, not with anyone. Nope. It's all fiction.
Absolutely.
I think that, I I became familiar with Gestalt in mid-80s. And I think it has been amazing what has happened during those years. New perspectives, development theoretically, methodically, and yes, I must say. So I still read a lot. I like many of the new guys who share a different light on Gestalt. And I think that's really the way to think, that it must evolve, and you must, I guess, even though I think Gestalt has been less dogmatic than what psychoanalysis has been. I think Gestalt has been more open. And to say the truth, of course, it's amazing how Fritz Perls and Laura Perls were influenced by so many other people. For instance, Rank. I read a little bit about that. So I think to continue being open, and Irv Polster, he has written some books about how to use Gestalt in different settings and therapeutically, like, you know, when people gather in the church and drink church coffee, etc. He has,
life focus and
life.
community.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yeah, I wondered if your Norwegian part was interested in the social sort of implications of Irv's work.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've stopped working, so it's not for me to do that. No. But I think it's a very nice place to go to, because I think Gestalt has so much to offer in very various and different settings, in schools, everywhere, really. So yeah. I don't know what else to say about it, but
yeah, that's fair. So is there anything else that you would like to add, either about yourself or anything we've talked about at this point?
I think I'd just like to pinpoint that I feel very, very, very grateful for having got to know Gestalt therapy and having met so many brilliant therapists and learning so much from them. And when I think about that, I also feel humble. And I enjoy that feeling, being humble, but also aware that I have developed my own competence by standing on other people's shoulders, I guess. And it was very nice talking to you. I enjoyed conversation very, very much. Yeah, so thank you.
I've got a sense of an incredible richness of speaking with you. So
The same, likewise. Okay, thank you.
So if it's okay, we'll leave this here.